This season of Influencing Entrepreneurs is brought to you by the Entrepreneurs Organization of Charlotte. EO Charlotte is part of the world's premier network of successful entrepreneurs, embracing the unique qualities of the entrepreneur: desire to build, extreme achievement, quest for new experiences. EO opens a new world for peers to learn from and inspire each other, leading tremendous business successes and a richer personal life. EO Charlotte, where entrepreneurs belong. Coming up on Influencing Entrepreneurs.
So that was probably a moment that I didn't think was going to happen, but we got the team together, I started talking, I just started sobbing, which I was not expecting myself to do. I didn't realize how I'd felt about those topics and those things, but you could tell afterwards, people respected me more than not that they didn't before, but you could tell there was this air of like, he's human and he's approachable and he's trying to wrestle these things that the rest of the world is trying to wrestle as well.
After years of teaching entrepreneurship and consulting with multiple companies, I realized that when business leaders share stories of not only their successes, but their mistakes, it had a huge impact in the classroom. So I thought, why not document those stories? On this episode of Influencing Entrepreneurs, we'll hear from Alex Smereczniak, the co-founder of the Charlotte-based startup 2U Laundry. Since its start in 2016, 2U Laundry has grown to over 120 employees across 3 locations. I'm Casimir Ward, and this is Influencing Entrepreneurs.
I gotta be honest, out of a lot of the bios and stuff I've gotten doing these over the years, I've never had one that had incriminating evidence to a crime in the material you sent on over. And I got to be honest, I'd love to hear more about this story if you're willing to share it. So I see a text regarding a car crash.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not comfortable, I don't want to push you down that route. At the same time, we've all made mistakes growing up and things like that. Things that we make those decisions that we think, oh my gosh, it's over. Like, I've screwed everything up.
Mm-hmm.
And your experience is just that, or?
No, that's exactly right. And that's where I think I am comfortable you sharing it, because I think, I don't know, we were all in college, we were all high school kids at one point, and our perspective on the world, the decisions we made are a lot different than they are now, and the ones that we do have now are shaped by those experiences, the good and the bad. And
right.
So yeah, more than happy to share.
So what is this? What's this mistake that in your teenage years feels like, I'm done, I'm going to end up, on the streets, or my dreams are crushed?
Yeah, so for me, and thankfully it was never that bad. I'm from Red Wing, Minnesota originally. Ended up going to Wake Forest University, which is how I ended up in North Carolina. And me and my co-founder now actually had always been, wanting to get into business together, wanted to, start something together. And growing up in a small town in Minnesota, it was 14,000 people. There's not a ton to do. And so early on, there were people in high school that started drinking and smoking pot and all these things. And
in this day and age.
In this day and age.
Yeah.
And so growing up, it was hard to get because we were in such a small town. So
right.
Dan and I were, could we start, just selling some to our friends and making it so that we easily had access to it. And then I think, like anything, it kind of snowballed. And I went to college, he went to college, and then it just started, something that we do over the summer, just kind of for fun. But then it snowballed and got bigger. And Dan had a roommate in college that was, having a guy drive in from Colorado with pounds of marijuana in the back of his car. And he was at the University of Minnesota. He's like, this guy's making $12,000 a week. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. How do we do that? And so we got the slick idea of, hey, maybe we should send some that your friend's getting in Duluth to me at Wake Forest. It's a lot of affluent kids that come from wealthy families. They don't want to go into the town of Winston-Salem. And so we thought it would be a good idea to do that. And
was it a good idea?
It was not a good idea. Partly because when he'd shipped the second order, he wasn't doing the same thing his friend was. His friend was putting it in Folgers coffee cans, sealed up, and it was pretty legitimate. And Dan put it in a cereal box with no Ziploc bag or no anything. And the students at the post office at the University of Minnesota immediately could smell it, called campus police. Campus police ended up going to Dan's house, and he did get in trouble for it. Thankfully, everything's been expunged, and he learned from it. We both learned from it. I was less impacted directly from a legal perspective.
I want to ask why you did this, but I'll be honest. You make it quite clear. It worked.
Right.
It made money.
Right.
There was and we're not going to dwell on this the whole time.
Right.
But here's the thing. Started a business at a young age. I mean, so there's that part that's built in you already.
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be a part where it kind of feels uncomfortable, like, hey, this is we're just doing a small amount of this for our friends,
Right.
to where that feeling of dread and risk is like, oh, no, that's not an issue anymore. We're now making $1,000 a week or whatever that money is, which heck, $500 a week for a teenager is a lot of money. At what point does that scale tip to where you're like, oh, I'm not really worried about those pieces right now. I've got a business to run.
Yeah, so I got to a point where, on campus at Wake Forest at least, I got to the point where people I didn't know would come up to me and say, hey, I hear that. And I was like, oh, this isn't, and that's when I decided to eventually quit. But it did, and that was a point where, somewhere in between, I guess, when we first started in that point was, your question about when does it get to the point where you're running a business? And I was running it out of it's called Peach. It was an accounting software.
Peachtree.
I was using Peachtree to
yeah.
do the accounting and it was, it's not a ton, but it was for me. I was a finance major at Wake. I wanted to say, hey, let's legitimize this as much as we can and be smart about it and run it like a proper business.
Right.
And then eventually had multiple people at Wake working kind of for me on it. I was in a fraternity there that made it easier to get access to everyone else. And it was when a handful of people that I didn't know came up to me and could identify me as the person that could help them find what they wanted. And that's when I said, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. We made good money. Dan was able to get thankfully out of trouble.
Right. But now you are that guy. You are the guy that owns a successful business that wants to be known in the business community, and not for the same reasons. But you own 2U Laundry. You've got a very successful business model. How did this start?
Yeah, so the way that I got into laundry and dry cleaning as a business in the first place was at Wake as well.
Well, and you're in the finance program, so you've already used your finance background to start your previous endeavor, but you're going to use the same knowledge for 2U.
Exactly. So I was a bag runner for the student-run business on campus called Wake Wash, and it was a door-to-door laundry and dry cleaning delivery business on campus that started out as an entrepreneurship class project. It was, the professor gave them, I think, $40 and said the whole semester we're going to go through ideation to concepting to building an MVP to going to market, and at the end of the semester you'll be graded on every step of the way, but most importantly the results and the traction that you garnered throughout the semester with that $40. And one group realized, hey, washers and dryers on campus are technically free and included in room and board. Let's start telling people we'll pick up their clothes and cleaning it. And at the end of the semester, they had the group with the hot dog stand come up, and they're like, we did $200 in revenue. There was a t-shirt selling company that did $300, and then the Wake Wash guys and girl came and were like, we did $5,000 in revenue. And the professor was like, you guys should maybe continue to keep doing this. If you did this passively with $40, imagine if you guys actually invested your time. And so I was working for them and fell in love with the business, thought I could scale to Duke, Chapel Hill, Vanderbilt, and they were seniors at the time. And I said, hey, what are you guys going to do with this when you're done? I want to buy it and see if we can't even make this even bigger.
So you're not even, this isn't even your original idea. You just see an opportunity that can be replicated over and over again.
Yeah, it was such, it was basically a marketplace model before that was like a cool, Uber for X or Marketplace for X. They were really just sitting in the middle, creating a platform and pair of supply and demand, and I thought it was brilliant. And I think they grew it to 30,000 in revenue when we bought it. I had $3,000 saved up, nowhere near enough to pay what they were asking.
So you're a college student and you're going to buy your first business, not even start up your own business. You got $3,000, you're going to buy it. And what is their willingness to sell it to you? Are they a couple years older than you?
They're seniors at the time, so they're on their way out. And that's where it was, hey, we are trying to sell it. We've grown it bigger than we ever thought it would be. But we need to make sure that we're compensated for the cash flow this kicks off. But we also understand you're in this weird position as a freshman that you're only going to get to run this for 2 to 3 years and then have to sell it again as well. And so we had to get creative on the structure. And again, I didn't have that. They were asking, I think, for one times revenue or something. So they're asking for around 30 grand. I did not have 30 grand.
Right.
I had 3. I convinced 2 other partners to clear their savings account with me. And then we were able to get a loan for $15,000. Ended up buying the business.
Do you match their sales price of $30,000?
So we had at one point during negotiations almost backed out and did exactly that. And then we realized they have this exclusive agreement with the university where they can be the only student-run laundry provider on campus.
So you were buying rights, really.
But they didn't renew it, so we were like, "Can we just go?" So we tried the back door, and they're like, "No, look, if you guys try to do anything like that again, this other group's going to get the company." And the university was loyal to, "Hey, you guys didn't renew, but let's renew now so you guys can sell it." And so they renewed the agreement. We ended up buying it, and so we had exclusive rights for the next 4 years to exclusively be the only laundry company on campus.
Now, were you able to sell it in the same fashion on your way out?
So yes, on the way out, we ended up selling it for about a 10x return on what we bought it for. We had grown it tremendously, and the reason is the first thing we realized is 80% of the customers were freshmen coming in. A lot of parents were worried about their son or daughter going out for the first time and wanted to support them. And so we went to the university and said, "Hey, we want to be part of orientation. We want this to be a checkbox option for parents and their students. So it's get your meal plan, get your parking pass, get your books. Here's Wake Wash, get your laundry service." Even though washers and dryers were included in room and board. And that, in that first year, 3 to 4x the revenue. And then the year after, very similar growth.
And I'm assuming you had little attrition. Everybody came back year after.
Right, you did see a drop off from when people started to move off campus, like sophomore to junior year. But yeah, it was fairly sticky. You had this new batch every year, freshmen always, comprising a majority of the customer base. And the margins were phenomenal because it was this subscription model where they'd pay $1,000 for the whole school year, $500 for the semester, and then you could pick weekly or bi-weekly, and the price would change based on that. But college kids aren't like the families we service in Charlotte. They forget to set the bag out. They don't clean their sheets, but once a semester.
Right.
But they could be doing it weekly or bi-weekly.
So the margins are much better.
The margins were phenomenal. We had 80% gross margins and like 65% net. So the business cash flowed in a really good way.
So you're leaving campus, which means you're leaving your business at that point. Or were you prepared to be the creepy guy that graduates but still hangs out and does laundry?
So I, at the time, we'd grown it more than I think any of us ever thought we would. And it was kicking off enough cash flow that the 3 of us were able to pay for, help pay for a lot of school. So it was meaningful, and we looked at each other and said, "Hey, we either go do the investment banking route or marketing route, which we can always go do, or do we keep doing this?" I really wanted to go see if this would work at Duke, Chapel Hill, and the model for me was going to be create joint ventures with college students, because to me it was the most impactful experience of my life, and even to this day, I still consider it that. And I was like, so is there a way that we could build this kind of like nonprofit-esque, for-profit business where we could create joint ventures with students that get to buy in to a business, run it, but really run it on their own, and then we'll help them with the sale process, and we'll be this independent third party that helps the transition constantly happen. And so we tried to do that at Duke, Chapel Hill, Queens. We actually got kind of far with Davidson, and the roadblock we kept hitting was, hey, we really need this to be completely student-run, no outside involvement. We don't want kids being taken advantage of, we would keep it 51-49, 51 the student. It was just a lot of bureaucracy and kind of red tape we had to jump over, and so ultimately decided let's sell it. And this was while we were still students at Wake.
So did you sold it back to students?
We sold it to another group of students after us. Yeah.
Okay. And your love of laundry continues after you do that. Do you go right into the public sector outside of universities with the laundry model, or do you go into the private sector?
Yep. So we sold it. I thought I was done with laundry and dry cleaning. As a career, decided to do management consulting at Ernst & Young. And the reason I did that was I thought consulting would look more like entrepreneurship. You're on teams with different people, solving different problems, different clients. So it changed every 3 to 8 months, depending on the project that you're on. And so I thought that's interesting. You're getting a lot of exposure to completely different things. And I love the people that I work with, but I think space that I was specifically on, I was consulting for B of A, Wells Fargo, et cetera, here in town. And it was just super dry, and it was
Do they lend themselves to entrepreneurial thinking?
not a ton, and that started to get really frustrating for me too. And again, I love the people, very smart people I was surrounded by, and that's probably the thing I missed the most at EY. But the work we were doing, the pace at which it was moving was just so slow. I saw so much waste. I remember there was one project that I was working on this deliverable for 2 full weeks. I'm talking 80 to 120 hours across the 2 weeks. And I go to talk to my senior manager on the project, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, like a week and a half ago I talked to the client, and we don't actually need the deliverable anymore." Like, so we just billed the client and wasted all this time. And yeah, he's like, "Yeah, it's fine, billable hours, whatever." And I just think that idea, like mentality in my head, was just not what I wanted to continue to
It
do.
has to turn a part of like your ethics off, or
Yeah, my ethics and just like the value that I was hoping to be providing. It's just like we could have had one conversation and saved, I could have been working on something else that would have created real value, even though I know the firm is getting paid for this, but and I'm sure the client writes some of these things off as whatever as well, but it still just doesn't, I don't know, it didn't feel good. And
so that even the way you mentioned it was creating value. You're looking for ways to create value. You're being paid to create value, but also not being allowed to.
Right. And I think the last straw for me was my roommate, when I first moved here, also worked at EY, and he'd be working 60 to 80 hours a week, and my whole life has been all right, how do I game the system kind of person. Like, I want the maximum value, but I don't want to work harder than I have to get the same value. And so right out of the gate, they're like, "Here's how you get a 5. If you get a 5, you get a 20% raise every year. And here's the things that we look at." So I just looked, break it down. How do I have to do this without having to overwork?
Right.
So I got on the right projects. I networked with the right partners. I got involved in the extracurriculars at EY and recruiting, and really tried to plug every single one. At the end of our first year, I get a 5. My roommate, who worked, he's a smart guy. He worked twice as hard as me from an hours perspective, got a 3. And it's just, this is real people's lives that get impacted by this stuff. I got a 20% raise, he got a 10% raise. It's just, to me was the last. I was like, this isn't fair. I think I want to work in a place where I'm
So
rewarded.
in that sense, you were successful, and that success exposes a system that you said, forget this.
It just made me kind of jaded to it. It was just, I want to be in an environment where the hardest working people, the smartest, hardest working people are going to get rewarded for the work that they're doing and the value that they're creating.
Now that you're running your own company, how do you feel about that philosophy with your team and your employees?
I try to, I remember that moment. I try to create people's compensation around exactly that. You're not going to get rewarded for, hopefully some weird system we made up. I know it's not random, but the system that we made up that kind of fits the most people because there's so many people working here. I try to tailor to each individual and what is the company's goals, and will it reward you for results and hard work to get those results, whether that's in 40 hours or 120 hours, whatever it takes you to get those results. Want to enable the team to make those decisions on their own.
What do you have an example you could share that of a policy that you put in that rewards that?
Yeah, so one individual comes to mind. He runs all of Charlotte for 2U, and his compensation, there's a pretty decent market base salary, and then a pretty aggressive variable comp that's tied to how profitable the city is. So at the end of the day, if he's able to get the clothes cleaned within the quality that needs to be, is the table stakes, he's going to get to reap the reward of doing that. He gets to basically run his own mini business. He runs the Charlotte P&L. So we walk through the P&L every month. He looks for places that he can cut costs without diminishing quality, and then areas where he can help support the marketing team in growing the business in Charlotte and generate additional revenue, whether it's different streams or same core services that we offer.
Does that same system empower him to do the same with his team as well?
To a degree, just not to the same extent. So he'll do weekly bonuses or monthly bonuses that he's got a discretionary budget for, that he'll use to try to incentivize his team.
But not to the point, because sometimes those programs work and mathematically they're great and they meet those cores, but they stop at a certain level. And sometimes it ends up being at the expense of other team members. Is there a way that you can evaluate their performance against his performance, or?
No, I think you're right. Like eventually there's, I don't know if it's diminishing returns, but it gets to a point where the individual might not be motivated by those things at all. It's more so the people or just having a job to begin
Some
with.
people are there for a paycheck. So you leave the consulting world. Do you start 2U Laundry and then leave, or do you just say, screw it, I'm out of here?
Yeah, so it's kind of a combination of the two. And what really sparked the idea to get back into it was seeing these two different companies on the West Coast. It was Wash You and Rinse, are the names, raised $30 million to go after the $40 billion laundry and dry cleaning industry. With what I thought were the wrong models. This was in 2014, and you were seeing Uber for dog walking, Uber for groceries, Uber for massages, you name it, and they were trying to be Uber for laundry. So they would had an app, they'd come here and pick up all of the shirts off of our back if we wanted them to in 10 minutes. But my thought was, we all have outfits that we can wear tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. It's really not an impulse need like ride sharing is. You need to get somewhere now. You're hungry, you want Uber Eats or DoorDash to come bring you food and make sure it's hot. Whereas laundry is this chronic recurring pain point. People build schedules around Sunday's laundry day, Saturday's laundry day. It's this chronic recurring pain point. And so I saw what they were doing. They were getting customers, they were raising money, they were on the outside in, they looked successful. And I thought, no way the unit economics work on an on-demand point-to-point delivery model for laundry. This has to be UPS or FedEx for laundry, not Uber for laundry. I want to take what I did in college and try to do this on a larger scale and see what happens. So I told Dan, my co-founder, about it, not only because we had the other business in college together, but he was working at startups right out of college doing sales and marketing. I'm more finance and operationally kind of minded. And he helped me build the first website. He quit his job, broke up with his girlfriend at the time, now wife, packed the car, moved down to Charlotte, and I quit my job at EY in December of 15, and we launched 2U in January of 16.
Where would that work? Because everything out, all these app companies are all out West Coast, Austin or Silicon Valley. Why Charlotte?
Part of it was probably like us being naive and thinking, hey, we're in Charlotte, why not here if anywhere? And over time, it became a core part of our thesis of, if this works in a city like Charlotte, why wouldn't this work in Chicago, New York, Boston? Versus if I go to New York or Chicago now, you might get a false positive where it looks like it's working because there's 5 million people here, but in reality, it's only going to work in the largest cities in the world and not the majority of the cities in the world. And so Charlotte became this kind of, if we can really dig in and prove it in a market that might, people might initially say you have things going against you, then we can do it anywhere. And then over time, as you started to hear things from investors and people outside of Charlotte, it became a chip on our shoulder. We want to plant the flag here and show that it can be done, and raise capital here and do these things that people are telling us are going to be incredibly difficult to do.
So you build it, so in Charlotte, as with every other city, you build out a website for it. When do you go more of the app route to, what does the development of that entail?
Yeah, so the first 2.5 years, almost anti-app, our thought was, again, this is a set it and forget it kind of thing. No one needs another app. It's incredibly expensive to build. We want to try to bootstrap and do this as pure MVP as possible. At the end of the day, our service isn't an app-based service. It is we pick up clothes, we clean them, and we bring them back to you. We need to be really good at those three things. How we communicate with you and get you to place that order needs to be efficient. It needs to be a good customer experience, but it doesn't need to be a state-of-the-art app. At least that was our thought. And so everything was SMS-based. We would get your phone number. There's a lot of free off-the-shelf software that we could use to automate those text messages. You probably Y for a pickup, no for don't need one, and then you could M for Monday, T for Tuesday, etc. And that worked incredibly well. And we eventually built an app because we'd raised capital. We wanted to start offering other services. We wanted to start tracking data that we didn't have access to otherwise. And so at that point, we invested in an application, but it took, I think a lot of companies probably raise money, build the app right away. Ours was raise money, get really good at picking up, dropping off, and cleaning clothes.
So that first iteration in 2016, did you raise capital, or did you self-fund that first?
So we self-funded the first 7 months. At first was 5-10 grand, a lot of sweat equity out of Dan and I. We had 5 guys living in a 3-bedroom apartment. We still have pictures of my bed, Dan's bed, another guy's bed at the foot of it, and we'd wake up at 5:30, drive Uber for a couple hours. We wouldn't eat into our savings too much, but we also got our first customers that way. It'd be bankers uptown, consultants, lawyers. Hey, why are you driving Uber? Everyone always would ask, and hey, we're starting this laundry and dry cleaning. Check it out. Here's a card, and boom, you start seeing people signing up from those promo codes. And then we got to a point where, where we bootstrapped to 20K in monthly revenue. There's something here. Let's go hire some drivers so that we can focus on growth and not actually living in it day to day. And then we bootstrapped about 50 grand in monthly revenue and realized, hey, there's something here. Let's go raise a round and launch Raleigh. So we raised 400 grand from, we had 3 term sheets from venture capitalists out in Raleigh, which was an awesome experience to get validation that, hey, we have something here.
How does that feel, giving up some ownership at that point of the company?
I think at the time, Dan and I had pretty honest conversations with each other about, and I highly recommend this to anyone getting started, is have that conversation. What do you want this to be versus just doing it and seeing what happens and having some idea. And we both were pretty confident that we didn't want this to be a lifestyle business. We didn't want to be the laundry guys 30 years from now. We want this to grow to 20, 30 cities, and then if there's an opportunity to sell. And if there is an opportunity to sell, but there's also an opportunity to add 5 additional services and continue to go and build upon what we've built. We wanted to have that optionality more than anything. It wasn't really a desire to sell in 3 years or 6 years or what have you. We just knew we didn't want to do this for 30 years. So whatever that looked like, in between then. And so we knew we were gonna have to raise venture to go as fast as we wanted to.
Honestly, 2 questions. How long before you don't have to do laundry anymore? And number 2, when do you get to start taking a decent paycheck?
Yeah, so the first 10 months, we were living off savings and driving Uber. So no paycheck for the first 10 months. We raised the round of capital, and even then we didn't really want to take much. Our thought was this is meant to grow the business, not for Dan and I. The investors at the time said take something to cover rent and food so that you aren't driving Uber in the morning anymore and not sleeping really ever at all. And so we started paying ourselves, I think, like 25 grand a year. And then as we hit milestones, we'd increase that. And we're at a point now where, I'm probably where I would have been at EY or close to. And the business is doing a lot better. But we, at one point, our board told us, pay yourself X, and Dan and I cut that in half and said, no, that's 2 different roles we could hire if we did that. And so it was always put everything back into the business. We don't, Dan and I don't have families. Dan and I didn't have any major, debts or responsibilities. Our thought was, every dollar we have, go back into the business to grow it as much as we can.
So, as you've brought in that capital, do you guys ever feel lopsided with ownership to where you're like, this is, we don't own, we have enough that we can still go out and sell more, or we're holding on to what we have right now because we can't own any less?
Yeah, so I think we're at a pretty interesting point. I don't think we'd want to raise another round where you give up 20+%, but I think we're at a place where we can still raise decent amounts of capital for 5 to 10% of the business.
And be impactful.
Yeah, at this point, if Dan and I have a modest exit with this, it'll, from a financial perspective, would have been better off than doing anything else, if we stayed at EY or what have you. But if this was again, something that we wanted to do for 30+ years, it'd probably be lopsided and not as motivating.
The home you own now or rent, you have a washer and dryer in there?
I do.
Do you use them?
Not incredibly often. And that's been one of the more interesting things. When we first started, we thought it'd be busy professionals in Uptown that might have these European style or economy washers and dryers. And it's been families in South Park and Myers Park and Dilworth and your more affluent families that are both working, have kids, and they're exchanging dollars for time.
You're collecting a lot of data analytics. Can I ask, from what you know, what triggers them to start using your type of service?
It varies. Some of it's a life event, newborn, and it starts out as a gift from friends or husband or a wife to spouse to another spouse. And then imagine any of us in this room not doing laundry for a month or 2 and then having to go back to it. It's funny, we actually have some consultants sometimes that help us with app design or UI UX or what have you type of service, and we'll give them a month of credit just as a thank you for helping us. And then they continue to use it and they start paying for it at full price, not discounts or anything. It just becomes this, once you're on, it becomes fairly sticky. You don't want to go back to what you were doing before.
I got to share, I'm a frequent user of 2U Laundry. And the trigger was no life event or whatever, is my patent that I was going to get one day was the machine that folds the laundry, because I would have 2 weeks of clean laundry all in a hamper. And when I found out, I almost washed my clothes anyway and had you guys pick them up to fold it. But that was why. And I was like, I wonder how many people are paying them just to fold their laundry. But anyway, that's insight from my side. As you've gone through doing this, we started off early about kind of a mistake you made early at a young age. Now the stakes are really high. What's a mistake you made into You Laundry in this venture that you were like, oh crap, this could kill us?
Mm-hmm. It's thankfully there haven't been any, at least not yet, mistakes that have felt like this is it, this is going to kill us. But it's almost death by 1,000 cuts. If you make enough, you have to make more right decisions than wrong. You're going to fail. You're going to make some bad decisions. But as long as you're making 60% of the time making the right ones. And so some of the big ones that jump out is, we hired a really expensive marketing person when we launched Atlanta, ex-McKinsey consultant, like Harvard MBA, all that on paper looks amazing. And it was just way too soon. We were really looking to hire, a LeBron that could be a player and also coach the team. And we ended up hiring, the best coach of all time. And we weren't big enough for that. This individual would have done incredibly well with a team of six, 7 people underneath them. But when we're as early as we were and we hired them, it was just too soon, and that cost us a lot of money.
And were they able to adapt, or?
Not really, and it was just the expense for that role didn't justify the results that we were getting. And thankfully, with marketing, you can see very quickly if the person is, or the investment's worth it or not. And in this case, after 6 months, it was very clear this isn't gonna make sense.
So you're ingrained in Wake Forest, a proud alumni. You learned a lot from Wake Forest, but what did you not learn in the classroom that they really should have covered?
I think people are incredibly challenging. And looking back on it, I remember the professor telling me this at the time, and it now makes so much sense, but it was like human dynamics and like organizations and people. I forget the title of the class, but it was basically about people dynamics in the workplace. A lot of Myers-Briggs, right. And
things we kind of roll our eyes at.
Yes, yeah. Everyone was like, "This is kind of like the free ball, softball class and whatever." And I remember the professor saying, "You guys are going to laugh and roll your eyes, but this is the class that is going to be the most impactful." And looking back on it, I mean, people are everything. No matter if you're in a software business or an AI business, people are building these technologies. People are building these companies, and people are unique and different and have different motivations and are excited about different things or get angry about different things, and being able to adapt and me work with you differently than I might work with you and you and you. And I think that can be taught. I think, and in a way, school kind of teaches it with these group projects, but I think being intentional about why, certain things to look for, certain things to change, etc. But that people interaction and people management.
Is that something you work on to this very day?
All the time.
How do you go about that?
Reading, different books, trying to talk to other mentors and other founders that have had these same problems, and really leaning on a network of people that have experienced the same things. One thing from like a personality perspective or personality trait, I've tried to become incredibly vulnerable and transparent. I've learned that if something is bothering me, I'm going to say it, as long as it's in a productive, constructive way. If I'm having an off day, I'm going to let my team know. And I've just found that like over communicating in any relationship, whether it's a professional one or one you have at home, that vulnerability, I think really barriers come down, and you start to get to the truth of why a person's motivated by what they are, why they're upset about what they are, and you can move past it.
There's usually an incident or some sort of point in time that you realize you need to be more vulnerable. Is there something that stands out that you said, I can't hold this in anymore? It hurts more to hold it in than to be vulnerable?
There wasn't a specific event, I think like work-wise. I think last year, and I'd already been comfortable being vulnerable with my team at this time, but when a lot of the protests were going on and things like that, I mean, our team was talking about it and people had questions, and I think that was a point where I was like, I don't know if in a work setting, if we want to start to blend these things, but I feel like people want to, and they want to talk about it, and I feel like as a leader, I have 2 options. I either try to stay silent and not say anything, or I lean in and I share my thoughts and be vulnerable and respectful. And so that was probably a moment that I didn't think was going to happen, but we got the team together, I started talking, I just started sobbing, which I was not expecting myself to do. I didn't realize how I'd felt about those topics and those things, but you could tell afterwards people respected me more than not that they didn't before, but you could tell there was this air of like, he's human and he's approachable and he's trying to wrestle these things that the rest of the world is trying to wrestle as well. And I think gave me the benefit of the doubt more so than might have traditionally as a result.
Well, that's
of it.
you putting a whole lot of trust into them, which hopefully reciprocally they do the same with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
The as you mentioned that, where do you feel taking your company above and beyond the actual business model itself? Does that help shape how you want to have any impact in these areas of what's happening in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're starting to franchise now the retail portion of our business. So these physical brick and mortar laundromats that we've started to build, and they're traditionally in lower income areas, in places where people can't necessarily afford their own washer and dryer. That's why they're going to these laundromats in the first place. Or they're in an apartment community that has just a room, and people take their clothes out before they're done and put them on the floor, and it's not a good experience. And so when we designed this location, we could have cut corners, built a comparable laundromat to the one. There's one right across the street where it's mostly absentee. It's the cheapest materials as you can possibly get, the cheapest equipment you can possibly get. Or we can take an approach of let's build a better version of this. Let's really build something in this community it's a community center. You're spending hours, your clothes are in the wash, they're in the dryer, you're waiting for them, you have to fold them, and you have kids that you're probably bringing with you because if you can't afford a washer and dryer, you probably aren't affording a nanny or a babysitter as well. And so why don't we take the approach of building something that resonates with the communities that we're in, and even though it costs more, it'll probably take business from other places, it'll probably create loyal customers, it'll probably create a much better experience, and in the long run, this will pay dividends. And it's done exactly that. The laundromat's done incredibly well, despite there being a laundromat right across the street. And I'll never forget the first day we had opened, we had a grand opening, and a woman came up to me and was sobbing and just latched onto me. And I'll be honest, I was taken back at first. I didn't know what was going on. And I just asked, what's wrong? Is everything okay? And she's like, yeah, it's fine. This is amazing. Just no one ever builds anything nice for us. And I think us meant, this community of lower income parts of the city, because it is the grocery store, the gas station with bars on the windows, and I get why that those are there. And but I think you're starting to see a lot more of that. I mean, I've seen Metro PCSs and Cricket Wireless all redoing all their stores and investing in the image and the experience. Probably because everyone's starting to realize this is worth it in the long run, and do good while doing well in as many places as you can.
If in 30 years you don't want to be known as the laundry guy, what do you want to be known as?
Oh, that's a good question. We've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of awesome people throughout this journey, the investors that we've met and their stories, what products they've built or services they've built or what have you. And realizing there's a lot of different ways to make a living. There's a lot of different ways to spend your time and your passions. And through those conversations, I think you observe and you see things that you maybe aspire to be. And I've known from the beginning, it's not necessarily laundry or pot or donuts. Yeah. It's the act of solving a problem that's exciting, whether it's, and I'm not going to sit here and say like the colloquial, like we're going to change the world, because that's what entrepreneurs do. They definitely do, but it's not always that kind of Silicon Valley, like, at the end of the day, we're cleaning clothes, we're giving time back to people, and that does probably impact a lot of lives, and we've seen the stories come in. But I get excited about the problem and working with a team, solving these problems quickly and in a clever way. And so a long-winded way of answering that question is I want to get to the point where I can help others do that same thing and invest in companies, help other people build companies, mentor young founders, entrepreneurs to do the same thing, because it's incredibly rewarding to help someone fulfill something that they're clearly very passionate about that I might not be. And for me, it's laundry. You might not care about laundry, but hopefully out of a conversation you and I have, that passion for just business and solving problems comes through, and that's the commonality that we have. And I've already noticed it happening with some younger founders that I mentor now, and it's the best time, some of the best time that I spend.
So Alex, thank you so much for sharing your story, for everything that you learned from high school and college, all the way to your endeavors to start 2U Laundry. Based on your passion for entrepreneurship and where you're moving towards, not just giving back to other entrepreneurs, but to the community as well. It's very well appreciated. So thank you again for being a part of this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/nexageeducation or visit CasimirWard.com to catch up on previous episodes. And be on the lookout for our next episode featuring Amber Lewis. Amber is the visionary behind The Good Kitchen, a sustainably sourced meal prep service that stemmed from her own wellness journey.